Mot so kyuc ban chan vui, en hung kyuc kok chan vui ban, wada tim thay mot kyuc, ba geo toi si kong bao geo gap lai cha toi nu truok noa. The sun had long since set, leaving only the faint glow of streetlights outside Sarah's apartment to light up her space. She sat at her desk, the silence of the room almost suffocating, and her gaze lingered on the old photograph that had been sitting there for weeks. It was a faded memory from the past, a picture of her and Jack, from a time when life had felt simpler, when love had been something pure and uncomplicated. It had been years since the photo had been taken, but it felt like yesterday. The intensity of the emotions she had felt for Jack, the heat of his touch, the tenderness of his words, they were still so vivid in her mind. Yet, there was also the gnawing sense of guilt that she had tried to bury. The last time they had been together, she had told him that she couldn't continue their affair, that she had to leave the life they had shared behind. She had gone back to her family, back to Ryan, the man she had married, an honorable, dependable man. He had been her rock, always patient, always kind. But Ryan didn't ignite the fire inside her the way Jack did. Ryan loved her, but Jack made her feel alive. The kind of love she had felt with Jack was one that couldn't be explained, one that existed outside of the ordinary. But the reality was that she couldn't leave her life behind for it. Or so she had thought. She had spent years building her life around Ryan, becoming the wife and mother she thought she should be. She had buried her feelings for Jack, compartmentalized them, told herself that it was a part of her past that she needed to let go of. She had pushed aside the passion and the rawness of their love in favor of stability. But no matter how hard she tried, the memories of Jack always crept back into her mind. Every time she touched Ryan, every time she saw the small family they had built together, a part of her would remember Jack and the love they had shared. And that part of her always felt empty. It wasn't long before Sarah's life began to unravel. She spent her days lost in thought, her heart divided between the man she had chosen and the man she couldn't forget. The more she tried to move forward, the more she felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her. Ryan was perceptive. He noticed the change in her, a subtle shift in her behavior, the way her eyes seemed to glaze over when she looked at him. One evening, after a particularly heated conversation about their growing distance, Ryan finally confronted her. He had been patient, but his concern had grown into frustration. "Sarah, you've been distant. I don't know what's going on, but I can feel it." "You're not the woman I married," Ryan said, his voice soft but filled with urgency. "What's going on?" Sarah had always been good at hiding her emotions, but this time, she could no longer ignore the truth. She sat at the kitchen table. Her hands folded in front of her as she tried to find the right words. But there were no words that could fully capture the complexity of what she was feeling. "I don't know how to explain it, Ryan," Sarah whispered. "There's someone else. Someone I can't stop thinking about." Ryan's face paled. He looked at her, as if the weight of her words had struck him to the core. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the pain of the confession she had kept hidden for so long. "His name is Jack. And I loved him. I still do." The silence that followed was suffocating. Ryan stood up, unable to say anything at first. He walked to the window, looking out at the street below, his mind racing. The man Sarah was talking about had been in her life before they were married, someone she had known deeply. Ryan had never fully trusted Jack, had always sensed that there was something unresolved between them. But he never imagined that Sarah's feelings for him had remained. "I don't know what to say, Sarah," Ryan finally said, his voice breaking. "How could you keep this from me? How could you live a lie like this?" Sarah felt tears sting her eyes as she looked at the man she had promised herself to, the man she had vowed to love. "I never wanted to hurt you. But I couldn't ignore what I felt for him. And I couldn't walk away from you either. I thought I could, but I couldn't." The truth was now out in the open, but it did little to ease the ache in Sarah's chest. She had confessed, but it didn't change the fact that their lives were irreparably damaged. Ryan's face was a mix of hurt and disbelief, and Sarah realized that no matter what she did from here on out, things would never be the same. She had shattered the one relationship she had always believed in. And now, she had to decide if she would try to rebuild it or walk away from everything for a love that had once seemed so right but now felt like a distant memory. The days that followed were filled with an eerie silence. Sarah tried to go through the motions, taking care of Emily, going to work, but she felt disconnected from it all. Ryan remained distant, cold at times, as though he had resigned himself to the fact that their marriage had been irrevocably altered. He spent more time at work, more time away from her and Emily, trying to avoid the reality of what had happened between them. One evening, Sarah stood in front of the mirror, her reflection staring back at her. She hardly recognized the woman who looked back. She was a woman torn between two loves, caught in a web of guilt, regret, and longing. The life she had chosen was not the life she had imagined. And in that moment, Sarah knew that no matter how much she tried, she could never fully escape the pull of the past. The message she had sent to Jack had been the final attempt to sever the ties between them, but it had only drawn her back in. As she stood there, staring at her reflection, she wondered if she had made the right choice. If staying with Ryan, trying to rebuild her family, was truly what she wanted. Or was she just holding on to the idea of a life she couldn't have? The thought of Jack, of his smile and the way he had once looked at her, overwhelmed her. It was an emotion she couldn't shake. It was like trying to erase a piece of her soul. She took a deep breath and texted him back, "I can't promise anything, Jack. But I'll meet you. I need to see you too." When Sarah arrived at the cafe, her heart was pounding in her chest. She had tried to convince herself that this would be the last time, just one final meeting to find closure. But as soon as she saw Jack sitting at their usual table, the familiar feeling of longing and warmth swept over her. He looked the same, yet different. Time had passed, but the way he looked at her was unchanged. His eyes were filled with both tenderness and pain, as though he had never truly let go of her. She hesitated before sitting down, her gaze locked on him. Jack reached out, his hand lingering in the space between them, but he didn't touch her. They both knew that crossing that line again would be dangerous, would open a floodgate of emotions they weren't sure they could control. "I'm glad you came," Jack said softly, his voice breaking the silence. "I've thought about you every day. I couldn't stop thinking about what we had, what we still have." Sarah felt a sharp pang in her chest at his words. She had tried so hard to move on, to bury the love she felt for him, but it never fully disappeared. It was like a part of her was always reaching for him, always wanting him in a way she couldn't explain. "I shouldn't be here," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I've made my choice. I've chosen my family." Jack's expression softened, but there was a sadness in his eyes that Sarah couldn't ignore. "I know. I respect that. But I just wanted you to know, Sarah, that I've never stopped loving you. You'll always have a place in my heart. No matter where you go." Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes as she looked at him, the rawness of their connection flooding her chest. She had never truly let him go. How could she? The love they shared had been too strong, too intense, to simply forget. "I love you too," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But I can't have both. I can't keep living this double life." Jack nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. He reached out, gently cupping her face in his hands. "I never wanted to make things difficult for you. I just wanted you to know that I still care. That I'll always care." The moment felt timeless. As though they were both caught in a memory of the love they had shared, unable to break free from the pull that had always been between them. Sarah's heart was breaking as she pulled away, feeling the tears slip down her cheeks. "I have to go, Jack," she said quietly. "I've made my peace. But this is goodbye." He nodded, his hand slipping from her face as she stood up. She wanted to say more, to hold him and never let go, but she knew she couldn't. This was the end. As Sarah walked away from the cafe, her heart felt heavy with both relief and sorrow. She had said goodbye to Jack, but the weight of that goodbye would stay with her forever. She had made the decision to stay with Ryan. To try to rebuild the family she had once loved, but it felt like a hollow victory. The love she had shared with Jack had left an indelible mark on her heart, one that would never fade. Back home, Ryan greeted her quietly. He had sensed something had changed, but he didn't ask. The silence between them was now a permanent fixture, an unspoken understanding that things would never be the same. Sarah tried to focus on her family, to give them what they needed, but it was hard. Ryan was distant, and Emily had become more withdrawn, sensing the emotional turbulence that had overtaken their household. Sarah knew she had made a choice, but she also knew that her heart wasn't fully present. The love she had for Jack was still there, a memory that lingered in every moment. In time, Sarah began to understand that the past would always be a part of her, no matter how hard she tried to bury it. She had chosen a life with Ryan, but she had also chosen to carry the love she once had with Jack as a part of her journey. Her heart was torn, but she had made her decision. The weeks after Sarah's final goodbye to Jack felt like a blur of fleeting moments. She continued her life with Ryan, but it wasn't the same. The space between them, once filled with warmth, was now filled with an unbearable distance. It wasn't just the silence between them, it was the weight of their unspoken truths, the things they both knew but could never address. Ryan had tried to pick up the pieces, tried to act like things were normal, but Sarah could feel his efforts were strained. He had stopped asking about her day, stopped making small talk during dinner. They no longer had the deep conversations they once shared. It felt as though they were two strangers living under the same roof. At night, Sarah would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind filled with thoughts of Jack. She could still feel the imprint of his touch, the way he had looked at her, and the love that had once burned between them. No matter how hard she tried, the memory of him lingered like a shadow, always there, reminding her of the life she could never have. Ryan, too, seemed to feel the shift in their relationship. He no longer asked her to spend time together, choosing instead to immerse himself in work or his hobbies. The tension between them was undeniable, and it hung in the air like a heavy fog, suffocating their attempts at normalcy. One evening, Sarah sat in the living room, her eyes glued to the window, watching the rain fall. She had been waiting for this moment, waiting for Ryan to confront her. To finally address the elephant in the room. She didn't know if she could continue pretending anymore, but she also didn't know how to face the truth. When Ryan finally came home, the moment was inevitable. He stood in the doorway, his eyes scanning the room. Before he spoke in a quiet tone, "Sarah," he began, his voice heavy with emotion, "we need to talk." She turned to face him, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. This was the moment when everything would either fall apart or finally come together. "I don't know what we're doing anymore," Ryan said, his voice almost breaking. "I've been trying to be patient. I've been trying to understand, but I don't know if I can keep pretending that everything is fine when I know it's not." Sarah felt the tears sting her eyes. She had tried so hard to make things work, to convince herself that staying with Ryan was the right thing to do. But deep down, she knew she had made a choice, one that she couldn't undo. And no matter how much she loved Ryan, a part of her would always belong to Jack. "I never wanted to hurt you, Ryan," she whispered. "I thought I could bury it all. I thought I could forget, but I can't. I've tried. I've tried so hard, but I can't forget him. I can't forget what we had." Ryan stood still for a moment, the weight of her confession hitting him like a slap. "So, what are you saying, Sarah?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Are you telling me that you're still in love with him?" Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the truth burn inside her. "Yes," she whispered. "I am still in love with him." The silence that followed was suffocating. Ryan stood there, his face pale, the hurt in his eyes too much for Sarah to bear. She wanted to reach out to him, to tell him that she was sorry, that she never meant for things to turn out this way, but the words wouldn't come. She had shattered their lives, and now, there was nothing left to fix. Ryan slowly sat down on the couch, his hands trembling as he looked at her. "I don't know how to move forward from this, Sarah," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. I thought we could work things out, but now I see. I see that I was never enough for you. And I don't know if I can live with that. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, but she couldn't find the strength to speak. The guilt was suffocating, the weight of her choices too heavy to bear. She had betrayed him, the man who had loved her unconditionally, the man who had given her everything, and for what? A love that was impossible, a love that couldn't be hers. I never meant for any of this to happen, Sarah said, her voice shaking. I never wanted to hurt you. But I can't change the way I feel. And I can't keep living a lie. Ryan stood up, walking slowly toward the door. He paused, looking at her one last time. I don't know what the future holds for us, Sarah. But I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when I know it's not. With those final words, he walked out of the room, leaving Sarah standing alone in the silence. She collapsed onto the couch, her hands trembling as she wiped away her tears. This was the moment she had feared, the moment when everything came crashing down. Part 8, A Heart Torn. The days that followed were filled with an overwhelming emptiness. Sarah tried to carry on, but nothing felt the same. The house, once filled with the laughter of their small family, was now cold and silent. Ryan had moved out, staying at a friend's house while he tried to figure out what to do next. Emily, sensing the shift in their world, had retreated into herself, spending more time in her room, her innocence replaced by the understanding that things were changing. Sarah couldn't bring herself to tell Emily the truth. She didn't know how to explain to her daughter that their family was no longer what it used to be. How could she explain that she had fallen in love with someone else? How could she tell Emily that the love they had all shared was no longer enough? She found herself at a crossroads once again, torn between the life she had chosen with Ryan and the love she still had for Jack. There was no easy path, no clear way forward. She had sacrificed everything for the stability of her family, but it hadn't been enough to quell the ache in her heart. And now, she had lost both. One evening, after a long day of work, Sarah found herself staring out the window once more. The rain was falling in sheets, blurring the world outside. She thought of Jack, of the love they had shared, and the choice she had made. Was it the right one? Or had she let go of something that could have been hers forever? Her phone buzzed on the table, pulling her from her thoughts. She picked it up, her heart racing when she saw Jack's name on the screen. I'm still here, Sarah. I haven't given up on us. I need to see you again. I can't move on without knowing you're okay. Please. Let's talk. One last time. Sarah stared at the message, her heart pounding in her chest. She had tried to convince herself that this was the end, that walking away from Jack was the right choice. But the truth was, she hadn't moved on. She couldn't forget him. He was still in her heart, still a part of her, no matter how much she tried to suppress it. She sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, her mind torn between the life she had left behind and the love she couldn't escape. She thought of Ryan, of the family they had built, and how she had thrown it all away. But she also thought of Jack, of the love they had shared, the passion, the connection. Could she really let him go? With shaking hands, she typed her response, I don't know if we can be together. Jack. But I need to see you. I need closure. I need to know what's left between us. She hit send, knowing that she was walking into the unknown once again. She had tried to let go, but now, she had to face the consequences of her choices. Sarah stood in front of the cafe once again, the same place where everything had changed. She hadn't wanted to come back here, hadn't wanted to face Jack again, but the pull was too strong. Her heart had been fractured into so many pieces, and no matter how hard she tried to ignore it, a part of her still belonged to him. The rain had begun to fall lightly, misting the streets with a soft, melancholic haze. She felt every drop on her skin, every second of hesitation and regret. She had made her choice, but now, the choice seemed to mock her, as though the love she had tried to suppress was too powerful to be erased. Jack was already waiting at their usual table, the familiar table where they had shared their quiet moments of happiness, the table that now seemed like a symbol of everything they had lost. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, those eyes that had once held all of her, told her everything she needed to know. He hadn't forgotten, and neither had she. "Sarah," Jack said softly when she approached, his voice carrying the weight of years. "You came." "I came because I need to understand," she replied, her voice trembling. "I need closure. I need to know if we can ever have a future together." Jack stood up, his movements slow, almost hesitant. He stepped forward, reaching out for her hand, his touch still warm after all this time. She allowed him to take her hand, and for a moment, the world seemed to disappear around them. It was as if they were back in time, back to a place where nothing else mattered. "We can't pretend anymore, Sarah," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't pretend that everything is okay. And I don't want you to either." "I know," she whispered. "But what do we do now? After everything? After what I've done to Ryan, to you?" Jack's gaze softened, his thumb gently caressing the back of her hand. "We've both hurt people we care about, Sarah. But I can't move on without knowing where we stand. I need to hear you say it. I need to know if there's a chance for us." The words were harder to say than she thought. She had been avoiding them for so long, trying to deny the truth she had known all along. But now, in the quiet of this moment, the truth was impossible to ignore. "I love you, Jack," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "I always have. But I don't know if I can walk away from the life I've built with Ryan. I don't know if I can destroy everything just for us." Jack closed his eyes, pain flashing across his face. He took a deep breath, exhaling slowly as though trying to find some sense of peace in a storm that had torn them apart. "I don't want you to destroy your life, Sarah," he said quietly. "But I can't be the one to hold you back. If you're meant to be with Ryan, then I'll respect that. I just needed to know. I needed to know that you loved me." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she listened to him. She had always known that Jack loved her deeply. That their connection was something rare and undeniable. But in that moment, she realized that love alone wasn't enough. She couldn't have both, she couldn't have Jack and her family. "I do love you, Jack," she whispered. "But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes, we have to let go." Sarah sat in the cafe long after Jack had left. The warmth of their time together was gone, replaced by an overwhelming emptiness that she couldn't shake. She stared at the table, the familiar cup of coffee in front of her, as if trying to hold on to something tangible in a world that felt like it was falling apart. She had told Jack that she loved him, but saying goodbye to him had been the hardest thing she had ever done. She had walked away from a love that had once made her feel invincible, but now, as she sat alone in the cafe, she realized that no matter what she chose, she would always carry the weight of that love with her. When she left the cafe, it was dark, and the streets were quiet. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy with the unspoken. She hadn't expected closure. How could she? After everything they had shared, closure seemed like a cruel illusion. But at least now, she knew she had done what she thought was right. When she arrived home, the house was quiet. Ryan was still at work, and Emily was already asleep. Sarah stood in the doorway of Emily's room for a long time, watching her daughter's peaceful expression. Emily had no idea what had been happening, no idea of the turmoil that had taken over Sarah's heart. And for that, Sarah was grateful. She couldn't bear the thought of her daughter being caught in the middle of this mess. As Sarah sat down on the couch, waiting for Ryan to come home, the reality of her decision began to sink in. She had chosen her family. She had chosen Ryan, the man who had loved her unconditionally, even when she had failed him. But the love she had for Jack was something that could never be erased, no matter how much she wanted to bury it. It would always be there, in the corners of her mind, a memory that would never fade. The days after the cafe felt like a fog. A haze of emotion and confusion. Sarah had returned to her routine, tried to be present for Ryan and Emily, but everything felt different. Ryan was still distant, his conversations with her short, his gestures of affection few and far between. He was trying, but Sarah could see the hurt in his eyes. He was trying to forgive her, but the wound she had inflicted on him was deep, and Emily, Sarah could see the quiet sadness in her eyes as well. She was too young to fully understand the complexities of adult relationships, but she sensed the distance between her parents. Sarah could only hope that the love they had for her would be enough to help them through the rough waters ahead. One evening, as Sarah sat alone in their bedroom, Ryan entered, his footsteps hesitant. He stood at the foot of the bed, looking at her, his face drawn with exhaustion and emotion. "I don't know how we can move forward, Sarah," Ryan said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of everything they hadn't said. "But I still want to try. I still want to be with you." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she looked at him. She had made her choice. She had chosen him. But she knew, deep inside, that her heart would never fully belong to him the way it had once belonged to Jack. "I don't know if we can ever go back to how things were," Sarah whispered. "But I'll try, Ryan. I'll try for you. For Emily." He stepped forward, sitting beside her, his hand gently brushing hers. "We'll figure it out," Ryan said softly. "But we have to be honest with each other. We have to start over. No more secrets." And for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, and she knew that the love she had once shared with Jack would always be a part of her. But she also knew that, for now, she was home. She was with her family, and that had to be enough.